I've played a lot of games in my life. Some are museum-worthy masterpieces, some are good, some are just fine, some are on the mountain of mediocrity, and others wind up here, in the awful archives, like the subject of today's video. Kotobuki Grand Prix was developed by Syscom Entertainment and released on the PlayStation in April of 1999. The game saw a release in Japan and Europe, but as far as I can find it never came out in North America. Now, before I get onto the main menu, I'd like to quickly note something. For ease of recording, I played this on an emulator, and the PAL region version of the game just doesn't have the opening FMV. It did a loading screen onto the title screen, like it clearly tried to load it, but it just wasn't there. Kotobuki Grand Prix, as you can maybe tell by the title, is a racing game. Specifically, it's a kart racer. Now, let's see what we have to work with. On the main menu, you have a pretty boring title screen, text over just a still image, nothing fancy, with your options of 1 player, do a race, 1 player mode, 2 player, do a race, 2 player mode, practice, basically just time trial mode, course record, basically just the time leaderboards for individual laps and full courses, save and load, well, it's just to save and load the game, and finally the options menu. You can change your controls, but there's not really anything to change. You can set the difficulty between easy, normal, and hard, and change the sound between stereo and mono. I would also like to quickly note that the button configuration screen is wrong. So it tells you that circle is triangle, X is circle, and triangle is X. It also has the item selection button, which should really just say use item, because even though you can carry multiple items in this game, you can't shuffle between them, you just use the one you currently have, and then it goes on to the next one. Finally, we have the main mode, the titular Kotobuki Grand Prix, where you pick one of the 8 racers, get introduced to their reason for entering the Grand Prix, do some races, and aim to win the Kotobuki Grand Prix. So with that, let's introduce our racers. First up, we have Shuggy. Shuggy works part-time at a pizza place to earn money for his sister's operation, but he doesn't get paid enough, so he enters the Grand Prix. Shuggy rides a courier bike. Belinda is a transfer student who moved to town recently but hasn't made any friends yet. She basically enters just because she's bored and it sounds interesting to her. Belinda rides a scooter. Rupert owns the bike shop in town, but he thinks he shouldn't live out the rest of his life as a shop owner, entering the Grand Prix for the prize money to open up a bar with a stage so he can finally have the spotlight. Sonny moved to the town from Tokyo. He's getting married soon, so he enters the Grand Prix to hopefully win some extra money. Sonny rides a delivery bike. Minnie's family owns a Chinese restaurant, but her dad apparently doesn't work, so her mom gave up on him and left. Minnie enters the Grand Prix on her bicycle, making her the only person in the game not on a motorcycle or scooter, but she enters hoping that if she wins, her mom will come back. Silvio, I think, is supposed to be a detective or something. He enters the Grand Prix because his landlord's gonna throw him out if he can't pay the rent. He calls his landlord a silly old man because it takes money to live a hard-boiled life. Silvio rides an Italian bike, so basically just a Vespa, I think. Kiki has trained herself for the Grand Prix by riding her scooter to every supermarket in town looking for a bargain. Her goal is to win and use the prize money on a family trip to Hawaii. She also describes entering as the biggest gamble of her life, and I don't quite get why. Maybe it's because she carries a baby with her all the time and, is driving around with it, and, maybe that's a little bit unsafe. Finally, we have Dodge. Dodge held the world record at the pass course. No one could beat him until Rupert beat his time, so his new goal is to win the Grand Prix and make a new speed legend of the fastest man. Dodge rides a racing motorcycle called the Speedster 4000. After picking your character, you get a little scene inside a castle with 2 people talking about how the annual Grand Prix will soon be here, and that their daughter Ayame has been training hard to win the Grand Prix once again. The Grand Prix mode is basically like the game's arcade mode. In order to reach the final race, you need to win 10 medals by racing. You get 3 medals for first place, 2 for second, and 1 for third. And with that, I think it's time we get into how the game actually plays. In terms of controls, Kotobuki Grand Prix is extremely simple. directional buttons to steer, X to accelerate, square to brake. Circle changes the camera a bit, which can be quite helpful, because while it's more noticeable with some characters than others, it's really close to you by default. Triangle switches between showing your speed as either just a number or as a speedometer. It effectively does nothing. R1 does a little jump which allows you to do a power slide, and L1 will use any items you have. Now, I'll give credit where it's due here. I do think this game has one unique and interesting thing going for it in terms of gameplay, that being the item box. You can pick up and hold up to 5 items at a time, and if you finish a race without using them, you can put them into the item box and bring them out for a future race. In concept, I think this is a really neat idea. In practice, it's not all that fun. While I'm talking about items, I should probably go through what they all are and what they do. In my time playing, I saw 14 different items, which to the game's credit is a very respectable number to have. It's more than a lot of kart racers have. First up, you have the drum, a typical washing basin, and in true anime fashion, you just drop on someone's head and give them a concussion, slowing them down and spinning them out for a few seconds. Up next is the rock hammer. It works kind of like the basin, only instead of needing to be pretty close, you have to be right alongside your opponent and you can take a swing at them. The hammer gets 3 swings before it goes away. The mines function like bananas in Mario Kart. They stick around until someone hits one. They explode on contact and spin out whoever hit them for a couple of seconds. There's the booster, as the game calls it. It takes a couple of seconds to charge and then you catch on fire for a bit. I think this is supposed to be like the star in Mario Kart, because anyone who crashes into you while you're on fire will be slowed down. But it says it increases your power and you don't go any faster or anything, so I don't get what they mean with this. Up next is the dense drum. It takes 2 presses to work, first locking on and then firing a single target. This slows the opponent to a crawl for a few seconds. Up next is the bazooka. It's a bazooka. As far as I can tell, it just shoots and blows up in an area of effect. I assume you can hit multiple people with it, but I haven't actually seen it happen. Up next is the bucket. I don't understand the point of the bucket. The game says it blinds an opponent, but either it has comically low range, or it just doesn't work and you hit yourself with it. And that, just by itself, I think might make it the worst kart racer item I've ever seen, because, you know, just blacking out the screen for yourself doesn't help. Up next, we have the ghost. The game says the ghost targets everyone and sends them off course, but I never saw it affect more than one person. The best way I can describe it is, if you ever played Mario Kart Wii with the Wii wheel, and then you accidentally covered the Wiimote's motion sensor, so you kind of just awkwardly turn the wrong way. Kinda like that, that's basically what it does. Up next is the confusion gun. Just like with the dense drum, it takes 2 presses to work. You have 3 shots with it and it basically just makes the target turn the wrong way. Next is the invisibility drug. It turns you invisible for a short amount of time so you can't be hit with items or crashed into. Then there's the handcuffs, which makes it so the target can't use items for a short amount of time. There's the Medusa camera, which turns the target to stone, bringing them to a complete stop for a few seconds. And finally, there's the Magic Claw, which switches your items with the target and is never useful. I played all 3 difficulties, and with one exception, the computer opponents just don't really seem to use items. Belinda being the one exception, she seems to use the hammer somewhat frequently, and I can only assume she does that when no one else does, because she has it in the box art. Paired with the fact that most of the items require you to be very close to the target, a lot of the items just wind up feeling useless. Once you get ahead, it's often very easy to stay ahead unless you just crash into a wall. On top of that, the item boxes don't respawn and there's a set number of them on the track. Once they're gone, they are gone for the rest of the race, which kind of takes away from the frantic fun that makes up the core of a kart racer. But to loop back to the start of this section, Being able to bring 5 items into a race with you is kinda broken. There's 6 people on the course at any one time, so you could just wipe all of them out without any hassle and breeze to victory basically from the start line. And since the computer opponents don't really use items and there's no turbo boosts or anything, you're basically just home free from the word go. So imagine you're playing Mario Kart, you get hit with lightning from the person in last frame 1, and then they just go flying off into the distance, and then none of the other items in the game actually allow you to catch up. That's what playing this is like. Now back to the actual Grand Prix and the medals we need. Like I said earlier, you need to win 10 medals, and you get 1 from coming in 3rd, 2 for 2nd, and 3 for coming in 1st. After a few races, you may be challenged to a special race by one of your fellow competitors, where you'll wager 1, 2, or 3 medals and race on a track of their choosing. Or they might turn up and say, hey, race me, I'll put up this number of medals, and then you can pick the track. You can also just say no and decline the challenge. For these races, you'll face the opponent who's challenged you, along with a couple of additional races, in the form of aliens or pandas, or whatever this girl is. Even if you beat the other racer who challenged you, if you don't come in 1st, it counts as a loss. Once you have 10 medals, you'll be approached for the final race against Ayame. Now, when she was mentioned at the start of the game, I was kind of expecting Ayame to be like a traditional Japanese princess or something. Nope. She is a toddler on a tricycle. That's your final boss. The race with Ayame works like any of the other challenge races, only this time it'll be on the new and longest track in the game, the castle. Win the race and you'll get a couple of little scenes for your character's ending. Shuggy wins the money and pays for his sister Yuri's operation. Belinda gets approached by a producer and thinks she's going to become an idol, and then she seems to end up becoming an enka singer, but she seems happy about it, so that's fine. Rupert opens up his bar and performs as he wanted to. Sonny has his wedding and runs his sushi place with his wife. Minnie's mother comes back and they work hard to make the restaurant a success. Silvio pays his rent and goes on a date with the unnamed police lady who turns up in some of the art. Kiki gets the family holiday to Hawaii that she wanted. And Dodge's ending is basically him just saying that he likes having the title of the fastest legend, and then just watching the sunset and commenting about how it's lonely at the top. Okay, I've put it off for long enough. How does Kotobuki Grand Prix actually play? As you've probably seen from the gameplay in the background so far, it's boring. It is violently boring to play. When you're selecting your character, you see their stats, their speed, acceleration, deceleration, handling, and weight. Now, I'm going to show you a little clip of a few characters on the same stretch of track just to see how they perform compared to one another. Now, you may be thinking, but Branch, why did you have me just watch the exact same clip multiple times with multiple characters? Quite simple. You have 5 stats in this game. The only one that seems to matter is handling. It doesn't really seem to matter what your top speed is, because looking at that speedometer, the fastest and slowest characters in the game max out at the same top speed anyway, and everyone accelerates fast enough that you never need to worry about that either. Handling is seemingly the only stat that matters, because having good handling makes corners a little bit easier, and they're awful. You may recall I mentioned that you have a power slide button on R1. This function is basically useless. You slide for maybe half a second. Honestly, you're better off taking the corners by either just doing the jump repeatedly without the slide, or by just turning into the corner early. But if you're playing as someone with bad handling, I mostly noticed this with Sunny and Rupert, even with that you'll still consistently at least tap the wall. So you may be thinking, well, just hit the brakes and turn that way. In theory, that would be a good solution. In practice, turning while braking in this game is violently slippy, and you're more than likely going to put yourself in an even worse spot. Now let's compare this to the power slide in an actually good kart racer. See, here in Crash Team Racing, I power slide, I get a clear window and indication on when to hit the button, and I get a boost. I can do this multiple times, and I can keep the power slides going to maintain a high speed and the game feels good to play. Or here's me playing Diddy Kong Racing. I've never played Diddy Kong Racing before, but drifting feels good. The characters are also just kind of a whole lot of nothing. This is a kart racer. Sometimes you don't need a super well-known set of characters. A perfect example for this is Diddy Kong Racing. Aside from Diddy Kong himself, it was an entirely original roster. Banjo hadn't paired up with Kazooie yet, and Conker hadn't had his bad fur day yet, so no one knew who those characters were. But that game's adventure mode, gameplay, and vitally, its tracks, got people invested, and now it's regarded as one of the all-time greats in the genre. So how does the game sound? Are the music and sound effects at least good? Every vehicle makes a loud, constant noise due to the engine. Somehow, Minnie, despite being on an actual bicycle, is also somehow super loud. A lot of the items don't have sound effects, which makes them feel even weaker and less impactful. The music is kind of interesting in a way. Like, I can kinda see what they're going for. They seem to be aiming for a kinda 1950s rock and roll style soundtrack, but here's the thing, the music is mostly just short loops that go for roughly between 40 seconds and a minute. I think their aim may have been to have the music loop once per lap, but it also just isn't very fun to listen to, isn't very memorable, and the sound of your character's engine being really loud doesn't help things, and the music just cuts out completely a couple of seconds after you cross the finish line. Which brings me on to the character animations. Each character has 2 animations that play at the end of the race, one if you're in the top 3, and one if you're in the bottom 3. And that's when you realise the PAL region version of this game doesn't have the voice lines from the Japanese version. In the Japanese version, all of the character intros are voiced, and they have a few sounds in races for picking up and using items, along with one at the end of the race. So, the characters aren't great, the items aren't great, the sound isn't great, the visuals aren't great, the gameplay isn't great, but there's still one thing that could maybe pull it back. The most important thing for any kart racer, the tracks. Are the tracks at least good? So, how do Kotobuki Grand Prix's tracks stack up? Well, they exist. They definitely are maps that you load into and do a race on. So now the question, how many tracks do you think this game has? I'll give you a second, tell me in the comments How many tracks do you think this game has? Okay, done? 6. It has 6. It has base, mount, dam, pass, mall, and castle, with the castle needing to be unlocked. The game splits courses into easy, medium, and hard courses, and there's 2 of each. The only thing that really changes though is the amount of turns, how tight the turns are, and how frequent the turns are, which makes the pass and the mall by far the hardest courses in the game, since they have fairly frequent, quite tight turns that make up a decent amount of the track. The game's final track, the castle, is listed as a hard track, but honestly it might be the easiest of all of them. Almost every turn is very telegraphed with signs giving you plenty of time to turn into it. So, what about turbo boosts? None. Stage hazards? None. None whatsoever, not a single stage hazard. No falling rocks or anything on the pass, no rapid water on the dam or anything, just nothing. But surely there must be alternate routes and shortcuts, right? I found one alternate path on the mall level, where you turn right instead of going left here and cut through this little kind of backyard. This path is harder to drive, brings you out at a really awful and narrow T-junction where it connects back onto the main track, and overall this alternate route is often slower than just following the track normally. There's also these metal tubes here that have no collision and you just sail right through them. On the back of the box, one of the bullet point notes reads, 6 distinctive courses to ride on, plus a hidden bonus track. Now, you would assume that this means there's a 7th track somewhere in the game, and if there is, I have no idea how to get access to it. And judging from the course record screen, no, there's only 6. So what it should have said on the box is 5 courses with a hidden bonus track. I know I shouldn't take back of the box statements too seriously, but let's quickly just see what the rest of them say. 3 challenging difficulty settings. Honestly, I played the game on all difficulties and I could not tell you the difference. 8 wacky characters and bikes to master. Aside from the handling, everyone seems to play the same. Kotobuki Grand Prix is a colourful and action-packed 2-wheel racer for players of all abilities. Okay, colourful, I can see that. Action-packed? Absolutely not. For players of all abilities? I guess that's accurate because there's no skill expression in this game at all. Kotobuki Grand Prix also has 4 secret races to unlock, but they can't be played in the Grand Prix mode. Ayane is unlocked by beating the Grand Prix mode once with any character. She rides on her jet trike. I would also like to note that she's referred to as Ayame in the story, but Ayane on the character select. There's also Colin the alien who rides in his UFO, Jonas the panda who rides on his mini-bike, and Cookie. I don't know if she's a human or a fairy or what, but she rides around on a little sledge. Maybe she's an elf. I don't know. Now, you may be wondering, but Branch, how do I unlock Colin, Jonas, and Cookie? Good question. I don't actually know. I assume you just beat them when they turn up in a rival race, but I beat Cookie multiple times and she isn't unlocked. I beat the Grand Prix mode multiple times on every difficulty, and I have Colin and Jonas, but Cookie just never unlocked. And then, because I needed to get the opening FMV, I loaded up the Japanese version of the game and played a little bit of that. I got the 10 medals in the Grand Prix mode, but after the second rival race, Cookie turned up, and while it did send me back to the main menu, it did unlock her as a playable character. So I have Cookie unlocked in the Japanese version, and everyone else unlocked in the PAL region version. While playing the Japanese version, I also found this snowman item that I hadn't seen in the PAL release. It just rolls a giant snowball in front of you. And then there's the most immediate and noticeable thing. The Japanese version of the game is faster. Significantly faster. And the game feels so much better to play as a result. Don't get me wrong, it's still bad, it's still painfully boring, but it definitely feels better to play. For the sake of comparison, here's a side-by-side of a lap on the first track. So, while I was editing this, I needed to go back and get just a tiny little bit more footage for things, and I actually noticed something. The in-game timer is wrong. So, just to prove this, I'll run another lap on another track, and I'll have an actual stopwatch in the corner. So as you can see, the in-game timer is wrong by quite a margin, and that really stacks up over the course of a race. Also, I don't know where else to include this, so I'm mentioning this now. Going off-road in this game is kind of nothing. Like, in any other kart racer, you go off onto the grass or onto the mud or something, and you get slowed down. In this game, you just keep going like nothing's happened. Like, everything is the same surface. Imagine playing a kart racer where the items are basically a non-factor, turning feels bad even when you have good handling, everyone seems to have the same top speed, and the tracks are miserably dull with no real variety or anything. That is Kotobuki Grand Prix. Now, I'd like to take a moment to rewind back to what I said at the start of the video. Kotobuki Grand Prix did indeed release on the PlayStation in Japan in April of 1999. It released in Europe in February of 2003. The game maybe would have stacked up a little bit more favourably at the time of its Japanese release, since there didn't seem to be all that many kart racers on the PlayStation. Crash Team Racing wasn't out for another few months, but that's just if we limit it to the PlayStation. If we bring Nintendo into the mix, however, by the time the game came out in Japan, Mario Kart 64 had been out for 2 years. Diddy Kong Racing had been out for a year. So by the time the game came out in Europe in February 2003, even as a budget title it didn't really have space in the market. The PS2 and GameCube had both been out for a couple of years. Mario Kart 64, Diddy Kong Racing, and Crash Team Racing, 3 absolute icons of the genre, hadn't gone anywhere, and because those games were a little bit older now, they were probably closer to the game's price range, especially if you wanted to pick up a pre-owned copy. On top of that, Crash Nitro Kart and Mario Kart Double Dash were both confirmed to be coming later that year on newer hardware. Obviously, if you wanted to buy these games now, Kotobuki Grand Prix is definitely the cheapest option, but the absolutely ridiculous increase in price for older games recently is maybe a topic for another time. Even if you just wanted to introduce someone to the genre as a kid, I don't think I could recommend this. Even 321 Smurf, my first kart racing game, has significantly more to offer than this game does. Fun fact, 321 Smurf was developed by Artificial Mind and Movement, who would eventually become Behavior Interactive, so Smurfs in Dead by Daylight when, just saying, Papa Smurf Trapper Skin, make it happen. I know I said earlier that a kart racer doesn't need immediately recognizable characters to be good, but it definitely helps. And there were plenty of licensed kart racers on the market by the time Kotobuki Grand Prix came out in Europe. The Smurfs, Toy Story, the Muppets, Lego, the Looney Tunes, Disney, they all had their own kart racers at the tail end of the PS1's lifespan, and they're all better games than this. So what about Syscom Entertainment? As far as I can find, most of their history as a developer is on Mahjong and Pachislot games, while also acting as a publisher for some games in Japan, publishing a greatest hits version of the original Rainbow Six on the PS1 in 2002, but perhaps their most notable thing is being the Japanese publisher for the original Grand Theft Auto. As far as I can find, the last thing they released was Pachislot Kanzen Koryaku, Onihama Bakuso Gurentai, Geki Touhen, on the PS2 in 2005, and I assume they closed down not too long afterwards, with the Syscom Entertainment name being registered to a new company in 2015. Also, apologies if I absolutely butchered that Japanese pronunciation. That just about closes the book on Kotobuki Grand Prix. It's a violently bland, mediocre kart racer without any real redeeming qualities. And I don't know why the English version is just like 30% slower, it just is. I didn't see any massive game-breaking bugs, but I feel like that should be the bare minimum. The game functioning shouldn't be the only real positive I can give the game. It doesn't look great, the characters look like they could come from a generic how-to-draw manga book, it doesn't sound great, it doesn't play very well, and there's no real replay value to the game. You can see everything the game has to offer in about the runtime of this video. The endings aren't worth doing a few races on some of the most boring tracks I've ever played to get. Also, you don't even need to play every track in the Grand Prix mode, you can just play the first one multiple times and get it done quicker that way. Kotobuki Grand Prix is semi-competent, inoffensive at best, but if you do decide to give it a try, please just play the Japanese version. Thanks for watching. As always, feel free to leave a comment or click any of the buttons down below if you feel so inclined, and I'll hopefully see you all again soon. Okay, thanks for watching. Later.